All right, welcome to the Snyder Report podcast. I am your host, Gary Snyder. The lovely Mrs. Snyder she used a sick day today. Can you believe
What?
that?
Man.
I know. She's under the weather,
Oh, I hate to
and
hear that.
you know, and we have 7 children, and we have one left in the house. We have one that is living with us, one of our older ones. And we have my son who lives with us too. So we got one of school age and 2 that live with us. But the problem is we babysit 2 of our grandchildren. And anyone out there that knows children, young children, they are basically a petri dish.
They definitely can expose you to any of the exotics that are out there in the world.
Oh my God. And I read on Facebook and social media about the stomach bug going around, and it's hit our house, except for me.
Oh, you
knocking on the kitchen
here.
table here.
Yeah.
But it's just amazing what they bring in. But as you're an educator, you've spent time in schools. Probably the sickest that I have ever been is when I was a life skills coach for special needs kids in an inner city school.
Well,
I was sick from September through May, nonstop.
Oh, wow.
Sinus infection, you name it.
Is it so? Gary, my time in the classroom, it seemed like the first 2 to 3 weeks of school, I was sick every single day. And after that, it was like nothing. I don't know if I had built up my immunity or what, but those first couple of weeks, I was always under the weather. And but after that, man, it was like, I guess my immune system became steel strong,
And dealing with special needs kindergartners and first graders is a whole nother experience.
Yeah. A lot of hands-on.
Yeah. It is. We had one little kid. He just picked his nose all the time. His finger was always up his nose.
Oh my.
And at one point, since I'm the life skills teacher, I'm like, that's going to get stuck up there and you won't be able to get it out. And the teacher pulled me to the side and goes, "You can't tell him that."
Oh, well, maybe you can, maybe you can't. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'd have probably said the same thing, Gary. So you're right in the same line as myself there.
Well, welcome, Terry. And let me just get this out of the way. We want to thank Robin Winston, who sponsors our podcast, among other things, and the newsletter.
Right.
But we want to thank Robin for his sponsorship and everything he does for us here at the Snyder Report. So let's get that out of the way. I called him Robin Williams the other day by accident.
Oh, no. Well, I tell you, so Robin, if anybody out there likes history, Gary, Robin has been a real supporter of Black history in Indiana. And I would encourage the listeners to go to Indiana State Museum website and the Historical Society and look at some of the information there that has been sponsored by Winston and Terrell and also his wife. So a lot of good information there and a lot of great history in the state of Indiana. And it wouldn't be there without Robin and his wife. So I much appreciate that. As a history person, I kudos and I appreciate it very much.
Well, since the last time we caught up on air, you have lost an election for state representative. You resigned as a school superintendent. You got a political appointment as the USDA field rep or something like that here in Indiana.
Lead director for USDA in Indiana, yeah.
You ran for lieutenant governor, and now you're stuck with me.
Hey, so it's good to be here, Gary. I can't say thank you enough for what you do, and I appreciate the opportunity that folks like myself have to be able to sit down and chat with you and get the truth out there. And I noticed you've got your Notre Dame shirt on.
I do.
Yeah, the ladies are number 1 now, or they get beat last night?
I don't think they got beat. As far as I know, they're still number 1.
Okay, all right.
But
but it's an opportunity that wouldn't exist, Gary, if you wouldn't step up and be in that spot. So I appreciate that very much, and it's an honor to be here tonight and to be able to chat with you.
Well, before we talk to you about your article about the bird flu, you were the candidate for the Democrats for lieutenant governor. Tell me what that experience was like, because I know when you were chosen, there was a lot of pushback from, how do I say this diplomatically? There was a lot of pushback from the very, I don't want to call them fringe of the party, but the far left of the party, about some statements you had made long ago, which were the same statements made by Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, but they were okay, but not Terry Goodin.
Well, it's one of those deals where, the experience was absolutely amazing, Gary. I got to travel and actually just resume my travels as I was traveling across the state with the USDA, but I was able to do the political side of it with the lieutenant governor as a lieutenant governor candidate, and I couldn't do that on the USDA side. We had to be apolitical, but, there's a lot of great people out in Indiana, and Indiana has so much opportunity and so much potential, and we just haven't reached it because there's just not been the leadership at the state that needs to be there. So it's unfortunate, but elections have consequences, and now the consequences of the election we see, it's going to be more cuts to those folks who need it. It's going to be more cuts to our public school systems, and it's going to mean Indiana is going to remain in the 1950s as we go into, toward the end of this decade.
Well, now that I'm doing a podcast again and you're doing the podcast, I think we're both qualified now to be assistant FBI director.
Absolutely. I was, I hate to say that, but I was looking at all of those appointees, and, they made it through, but I don't, I can't say that I would probably support any of them, to be honest with you, because I don't know if any of them are really qualified to be in the position they're in. But that's, as we said before, elections have consequences. And, one thing about Donald Trump is this: if he says he's going to do it, he'll do it. And he said exactly what he was going to do. And I don't know if people just took that for a grain of salt or if they just thought he was lying like normal. But he's following through with just about everything he said he was going to do. He's actually undertaking that. And whether it's legal or not, we don't know if he can do that through all these presidential orders and all these administrative orders. But right now, it seems to be garnering steam, and he's full steam ahead. As long as Elon's there to tell him what to do, I think we're going to continue to see this.
Well, when you ran for lieutenant governor, you got to share the stage with, what adjectives are there to describe Micah Beckwith? There's white Christian nationalist, batshit crazy. You can go down the line, but you did share a stage with him, and between you and me, he has one of the most punchable faces that I have ever seen in my life. Not to say that anyone should punch him; they should not.
Yeah. No, but he is elections have consequences. He is the lieutenant governor, and he was doing social media, his campaign social media, while he was up at the podium there leading the Senate. So. None of this is a surprise to me, Gary, because I've been there in government, and I've dealt with some of these individuals in the past, and I understand their philosophy. I understand where they're coming from, and they enter the state house doors with a chip on their shoulder, and when they get in there, they've got the power to be able to do things to try to make sure, instead of getting rid of that chip, they make sure that chip gets bigger and bigger, and we're seeing that as the legislature plays out, and it's unfortunate for the state of Indiana. But this is the leadership that Hoosiers have chosen, and Donald Trump is very popular in Indiana, and we'll see how all this pans out as we move forward.
Well, I remember you sent me a text or a message or something, because you did debate him, and you were like, he mentioned farmland at $1,400 an acre. And you told me, if you can find farmland at $1,400 an acre, go buy every bit of it.
Go buy every bit of it. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's amazing because his lack of knowledge in agriculture, which he is the Secretary of Agriculture, which they tried to take away from him in the legislature.
He had one job. Yeah. That away.
So, It's amazing. Unfortunately, the election turned out the way it did. I think it's a setback for the state of Indiana. I think there's a lot of folks who think that, and there's going to be a lot more folks who realize that as the next 4 years unfold. And I'm an optimist, Gary. I always try to make the right moves and try to do things that are going to be beneficial for not myself, but for everybody else around me. And I think that's what we need to get back to in Indiana politics is what can we do that's going to benefit everyone and not just a small group or a small special class of Hoosiers that already have all the privileges they need to be able to move forward. So it's going to be a real I'm not going to say awakening. It's going to be a real I don't know if you want to say a real sleeper 4 years because Indiana's going to struggle. We see with revenue. Now the revenue's down. The budget that was proposed is an absolute disaster for schools. It's going to be an absolute disaster for local governments. So it's going to be a real trial of leadership, and we'll see if the leadership is there. It's not shown its head yet. Hopefully it's hiding somewhere, and it'll pop up here toward the end of the legislative session, but I'm not very hopeful about that.
Before we get to, the bird flu and your expertise with the USDA, you were an educator, you were a school superintendent of a small school district in southern Indiana. What do you think about some of these bills that are attacking public education here in Indiana?
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous, Gary. And really, it's this, I always coin it as this, it's the reverse Robin Hood, because what they're doing is they're taking away from the poor and giving to the rich. And that should not be the way our system works. It's not the way our system is meant to work. But unfortunately, that's the way the system and the machine continues to grind slowly here in Indiana. And it's unfortunate because the multitude of those who are going to be living in our state and being citizens in our state are going to get the short straw in just about every kind of program that comes along. And it's just too bad. And, there's nobody, and I will challenge anybody to the table that will not agree with me that when I say that educator is the great leveler and a great education is the largest rung on the socioeconomic ladder. And what we're doing is we're failing Hoosier children right now in the state of Indiana by not funding our public schools.
I would say amen, but, it's just a shame what they're trying to do, trying to take over entire school districts or get rid of entire public school districts, Indianapolis, Gary, trying to take away tax dollars from public schools and make them share property tax revenue with charter schools. If you didn't know what was happening, then you should, because at some point there's not going to, if they have their way, there's not going to be public schools in Indiana. And let me add this, because let's remind everyone, they've been in power, complete, absolute supermajority power for 15 years. So anything that is wrong, that they're claiming is wrong, that is broken, they want to try to fix, even though they broke it. And at what point do you say, that is crazy? What the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results?
It is, Gary. And, you're exactly right. And it's one of those situations where they're continually going to fix education. Well, they're the ones that broke education. They're trying to fix the property tax system. Well, guess what? They're the ones that broke the property tax system. So as we go on, Medicaid and our healthcare system, they're going to try to fix the healthcare system. Guess what? Yeah, you're the ones that broke the healthcare system. So you can just go down the list, and the whole list could put check marks by those. And, Gary, the check marks, unfortunately, go by those services that are the most critical: healthcare, education. As we talk about that, those are some very, very, very important aspects of everyone's lives. And those are the ones that they keep fumbling. And that's why Indiana's being set back. We've got to get leadership in Indiana that can move the ball forward. I want to talk football here, man. We want to be able to grind out yards forward. We don't want to continue to be pushed backward, right?
That's right. When we take a look at the national level, I've said, why would you trust a billionaire to look out for middle-class Hoosiers? Why would you trust a millionaire governor to look out for hard working class Hoosier workers. Because if you're going to rely on the millionaire governor, he's going to watch out for his buddies. He's going to watch out for the wealthiest Hoosiers. He's going to watch out for the corporations.
Right.
And until Hoosiers start feeling that pain, either at a state level from Governor Braun or at a national level from President Musk, I went there.
And I'm laughing.
You're gonna keep falling behind, and Hoosiers will keep falling behind and keep falling behind and keep bitching about it until at some point they will wake up and realize that the people they're electing are the people that are not watching out for them. They're watching out for their own self-interest.
Wow, you hit it right on the head, Gary. And, unfortunately, I mean, just the statistics alone, I mean, our workers earn less than the average worker across the United States of America. And Hoosier workers have been known to be the best workers in the nation. Our workers should be earning the highest wages across the scale, not toward the bottom or the least. So just those things that make a difference. And I tell you, one of the things that really stood out to me as I was campaigning and traveling across the state of Indiana in the last election cycle was, there's one thing that's gone extinct in the state of Indiana that you don't even realize. That was a refresher, that was to help pump people back up, that helped regenerate or revive folks, and that's called the family vacation. Gary, the family vacation in the state of Indiana is extinct because people can't afford to go. And they're with the jobs they have now, the employers will not let them take enough days off to be able to take a trip. So we've got to figure out ways to get back to our quality of life that we enjoyed back in the 50s and 60s and, in the 70s and 80s, and try to figure out how in the world do we make Indiana a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And what's going on in the State House right now is just the exact opposite.
Train wreck. And, we have no one to blame but ourselves.
It's just like the old Ozzy Osbourne song, man. It's this crazy train, and it's, it's going off the rails, man. And it just makes no sense. And I think Hoosiers are looking for everybody in the world to blame. And, before they were blaming Joe Biden, even though that the United States economy was the best it had been in 50 years under the Biden administration, but still yet it was Joe Biden's fault, the reason they weren't being able to get ahead. And I think they're going to find out now that with the new policies that Trump's going to try to pursue, things were a lot better off. And one of those deals where you're better off 4 years ago, when we get to the end of this term, we're going to be able to say, yes, I was much better off 4 years ago than I am today, because President Trump came in to promise that he was going to lower the price of commodities and food, and they have done nothing but continue to increase. So
and
some
he's
of
done
those
nothing
things
to try to reduce them. I mean,
no.
you can't, girls can't, or boys can't play girls sports, and woke this, woke that. Well, hell, I went to Walmart and you couldn't even buy eggs.
Right. Well, as we move forward, I think the Democrat Party, we're kind of getting off the rail here a little bit, but I think it's worth talking about. I think the Democrat Party needs to pay attention to everyday common folks again, Gary. I think what's happened is sometimes I think at the national level they chase dollars, and they chase those folks who are going to donate and give big money, and sometimes they just need to listen to what people are saying in the areas around them. And I think probably instead of going to those states where they're very successful, those blue states where the Democrats do very well, and doing their research and asking questions, I think they need to come to states like Indiana and those red states and start asking those folks that live in those red states, why in the world are you supporting politicians and folks who are continuing to make your way of life worse? And I think that's the avenue we need to take, is we need to quit playing on our strengths, and we need to try to figure out what our weaknesses are and try to build up those and build up and build on our weaknesses. Donald Trump, for whatever reason, people like him. He's the president, so I'll give him the respect of being the president of the United States of America. I disagree probably with about everything that he says or does, but he's in charge. So we have to give them that respect to say, okay, it's your baby. It's your time to run it. The Republicans run the House. In the national level, they run the House. They run the Senate. They run the executive branch with the president. And they also have the ability to be able to manipulate laws in the Supreme Court. So really, Gary, the Democrats are really handcuffed at this point on trying to get things accomplished. And, really, we just have to sit back and say, okay, guys, gals, you all are the ones that elected. You're the leaders. Let's see where you take this place. Let's see where we go. And I think people are going to be disappointed at the end of 4 years where we've been taken.
Well, and I think part of the problem here in Indiana is that Democrats are seen as at the national level instead of the local level. And even sometimes here in Indiana, you have pockets of Democrats, say in Marion County or Bloomington or South Bend, and they try to mirror those policies that are at a national level.
Right.
And when they're the elected officials, that's what people see.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone like you down in Southern Indiana or me up here in BFE in Northeast Indiana, we are caught with that label of a national Democrat or the Democrat from these enclaves in Indiana. There's nothing wrong with saying, no, maybe men shouldn't be playing women's sports.
Right.
Or maybe, maybe they should wait until they're 18 to have a sex change.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with saying that.
No, there's not. And, really, Gary, as you talk about this and as we continue to evolve as a party, I think some of the common sense things that folks and individuals talk about are some of those things that people complain that the Democrat Party doesn't have. So we got to try to figure out how do we become the common sense party once again, the party of the working class and the party that's trying to lift everybody up and not just a few. And as we work through all of that, you got to remember the Democrat Party is supposed to be a big tent, but we have certain groups in our big tent that don't want anybody else to be a part of that party. And even though we disagree on one or two issues or three issues, that doesn't mean we disagree on the total philosophy of what our party stands for. And right now, they have a litmus test, Gary, of if you don't check all the boxes here, then you're not a Democrat. Well, guess what? That's a pathway to losing. And Robin Winston always said, we'll bring up Robin again, he always said this, that the politics of exclusion leads to the politics of losing. So, I mean, he's right. You have to figure out ways to bring your people together and make your party bigger, not exclude people and make your party smaller. And I think once we figure that part out, I think we'll continue. We'll be able to jump back up and go forward again.
Well, there's one reason we do this podcast from the kitchen table. Well, the two reasons. One is I can't afford a regular desk, so it all fits on the table. But number two, kitchen table issues are what matters. It's can young people buy a home? Can they afford a new car? Can they afford their insurance? Do they have health care? Can they afford eggs? Can they find eggs?
Right.
How do they provide for their family to make life better than what their parents have? And at this point, right now, they can't.
Right. You're exactly right, Gary. And, as we talk about the public schools and the funding there and the current legislature's eagerness to want to fund privates and all those that are non-public, is there's other ways of funding those schools rather than taking money out of the kitty of the money that goes to our public schools. There's a multitude of ways to fund and allow those charters, those private schools to be funded at an appropriate level without taking taxpayer dollars to do it, Gary. And that's what, as the lieutenant governor candidate, that's what I was trying to explain to people. We don't have to take the money from public schools for these other schools to get dollars. There's other ways to do this that can be done through investments. And as we move forward, then those schools will be whole as well. And you're not splitting the money up between the groups. So it's just the philosophy of not wanting to look beyond your nose to try to figure out, okay, what's a better way to fund this other than trying to tax people? And the state of Indiana is notorious about that, Gary. We don't look for any other kind of alternative funding for any of our programs, and that causes a large tax increases for our citizens. And it's wrong. It shouldn't happen. Our fiscal leaders should be continuously looking for ways to fund our government other than forcing people to pay more taxes, and they're not doing that. And that's what aggravates me to the core, man, is we don't have anybody there that wants to think beyond what's already been done. And it's proof, and that's why Indiana continues to fall behind in all categories, man.
Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. Yeah, you wrote an op-ed for the Snyder Report about the bird flu. Why don't you just talk a few minutes about that article and where we are at now with the bird flu? Because my wife is not an alarmist, but it's getting serious. Or it's jumping from birds to cows, and you have cows,
right?
You're a cow. You're a is it a cow farmer?
Beef farmer.
Beef farmer. It's jumping to cats. It's jumping to humans, and it's getting crazy. And with the leadership we have, we've been down this road before when there was a pandemic and Donald Trump and was in charge.
Well, you're exactly right. And unfortunately, to stop a pandemic, you have to be in front of it, right? And I'm just begging and hoping that the state of Indiana is in front of it. We've got great people at the Board of Animal Health and great people at the Indiana Department of Health. And we just got to make sure the leadership gives them the ability to go out and get in front of all this. And, really, Gary, it's as we move forward, the late night co-hosts and the late night comedians that we all love, they have quit making fun of bird flu now because they realize it's a serious issue. And as we get into the migration season, Gary, which is really going to start here in about 3 weeks in Indiana, with all the birds that have flown south, they start migrating back toward their northern homelands. It's really going to pick up, and we got to make sure that we, as a state, prepares our farmers and our folks that live in rural areas and in the cities as well. We have to make people aware of, hey, this is an issue that could transform and transmit it into humans at some point, and it can evolve, and it can become very serious. And we have to make sure that it's not a joke, and that people are serious about it. And what's that got to do with the price of eggs? A whole lot, Gary, as you know, because as the bird flu continues to ravage through our poultry farms, then the laying hens that provide us with all of our eggs, they're literally, they have to put down, or you'd say on the street, kill millions and millions of these laying hens, and there's just not the capacity to be able to keep up with the demand for eggs. And eggs are wonderful. I would eat a carton of eggs a week. If I wasn't too lazy to go cook them or fry them all the time, right? But eggs are wonderful, and they're great. They're a great source of energy and protein. So we've got to make sure that as we move forward, it's not necessarily a joke. And there's a lot of things that people can do, and nobody likes to stick their hand in bird poop, right? But literally,
I don't.
That is literally one way that it can spread, or you can step in it. So that one of the parts of the article was, hey, just be aware of your surroundings, and if you just don't blindly pick up a dead bird and throw it in a trash can or whatever, make sure that there's protocol you follow, that we can try to put an end to this pandemic before it even gets really a stronghold. Now, I'm going to say this: it's already started in Indiana. You've seen that. You've seen the culling now that's taken place, and the millions of birds that have been put down in the state of Indiana now because of the bird flu. So we've got to figure out ways to stop it.
It's bad enough that John Rust went on MSNBC to talk about it. They had to put down over 2 million birds.
Yes.
Yes. And that's a lot of eggs every day that's not going to market.
You're exactly right. If a bird laid one egg a day, that's 2 million eggs right there, man. So it's an issue, and it's a serious issue, and it really boils down to our food supply. And when we talk about food supply, that's one of the things we have to have, and one of the things we have to have to be able to thrive and live. So we want to make sure that we make food affordable, and the only way to make food affordable is to make sure that we have the right protocol in place, so the animals that provide that food for us will be able to survive and thrive and move forward as well.
Well, you were with the USDA in Indiana. How prepared is the USDA right now, even under Trump, to recognize this problem and to make sure that it's taken care of in Indiana.
Right. So the USDA, Gary, is all hands on deck. They're putting everything they can into the fight. One of the issues with the USDA is it's divided in amongst the 50 states, and we get that as a USDA. I shouldn't say we, but the USDA sends that information. They send the funding. They send all the resources to these states to be able to fight the flu in those states. But right now, with the funding that was stopped at the federal level by Elon Musk, the states aren't getting the resources they need to be able to fight this pandemic. So the USDA, we've got a great group in Indiana, and I tell you, being at the national level, there's a wonderful group nationwide. Those folks know what they're doing. They're on top of it. And as long as the states don't get in their way, we'll be able to control this. But if the states get in their way and Elon Musk continues to not fund the programs that need to be funded to prevent it, then it's going to be a real serious issue, Gary.
How serious is the USDA, at least in Indiana, about it right now? Because I don't think that, at least at a state level, at least at the top, they're more worried about God's guns and babies instead of chickens.
Well, right. So it's one of those deals where there are people dedicated to fighting the bird flu and the disease that are located in Indiana. And those folks are on point, Gary. They're getting the information out. They're making sure that things work along the lines that they should. We've got a wonderful state veterinarian in the state of Indiana. He's been there for 30 years plus, and probably 40 years. So he's worked under both administrations. He's probably one of the most renowned and most respected state veterinarians in the United States of America. But we just got to make sure that his hands aren't tied either, because the states, as the state cuts funding from the Fed, it flows from the Fed to the state, to the agency. When that fund stops, the funds stop flowing to the state, then the state obviously stops flowing those funds to the agency. Then that's where the real problem gets created. And that's what we're looking at right now. It's almost like, and I hate to use this term, but it's almost like the perfect storm, Gary. We're coming into migration season. There's been a funding freeze at the national level. That funding freeze then impacts the state level. So I know the folks at BOA, the Board of Animal Health, they're jumping and screaming and jumping and doing everything they can to try to prevent the spread. And my hat's off to them, because I know they're working short-handed right now.
We have backyard chickens. I guess that's to put it like, we have a lot of backyard chickens.
Right.
So we have plenty of eggs.
Right.
But what should someone do, like ourselves, who have the backyard chickens, to make sure our chickens don't get infected? And what should we do if we suspect it?
Really, this sounds crazy, Gary, but during the flu season, what you really need to do is you should anytime you enter the backyard area or whatever, anytime you're going to be around your birds, you need to make sure that you have washed your hands very well. You need to make sure that you don't wear clothes or shoes that you wore to the shopping mall or anywhere like that outdoors, because of stepping into something or whatever. So you really need to have a complete set of clothing that you use when you go out and take care of the chickens. So that way something doesn't accidentally spread as you move forward. And obviously, if you have a dead bird, try to make sure you see that and get that to the local health department ASAP.
So if we have a dead bird out there, is that something we should call them immediately or wait to see? Because I've seen the news reports, I've seen the people that have these huge flocks that said, typically, they would act a little sick first and maybe die a day or two later. Now they're just dropping dead.
Right.
So what should we do if we suspect it?
So really, the most important thing to do, Gary, is if you suspect it, or if you find a dead bird, get that to your health department as quick as you can, and they'll be able to get it to the proper authorities to be able to determine whether or not it was bird flu. Now, keep in mind that if you've got a flock, and of course they all come in to roost at night in the same location, it's going to spread pretty quickly. And it's one of those deals where you could probably be prepared to lose your entire flock within 48 hours. So it's one of those deals where you want to try to get on it pretty quickly. And if you do find out that it is the bird flu, it's going to be a real struggle to save your flock. But the good part of that is that it does move on, and it's kind of like the flu season with humans. I mean, there's certain times of the year that it peaks, and then there's other times of the year that it does slow down. So, and it seems as though that the peak time kind of follows the human flu times as well. So,
do you have confidence in the federal government that they could help stop this?
I have confidence in federal employees that they have the ability and the know-how to be able to stop it, as long as the leadership doesn't prevent them from doing that by tying their hands.
All right, Terry. Well, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. Anything else? I mean, I try to cover everything, but I'm getting old and I forget every once in a while. So is there anything else that you wanted to cover that maybe I did not ask you this time out?
Well, it's one of those situations where I'm a farmer, so this is one of those issues that it gets talked about in my circles a lot more than it does for those folks who may live in Indianapolis or in Hamilton County or somewhere else, that's not around agriculture. So we just want to make sure that those folks don't take it lightly. That hey, this is just something that can happen in rural Indiana. It can happen in downtown East Chicago, right?
Are you worried about them the bird flu jumping to your cows?
Well,
is that a concern of yours?
It is a concern. Of course, it's a concern of all beef farmers, and especially dairy farmers, because that's where the first transition has taken place. But as we know, and as viruses mutate, they tend to mutate toward the strong side. So who knows? The beef cattle, unfortunately, is probably next in line to be infected. So, but you just make sure you keep all the protocol together, and you make sure, as we said before, it's so important not to wear contaminated clothing or shoes in and around your flock. And the same thing with cattle around your herd, because if you visit a farm and for whatever reason that farm has something going on, and you wore your rubber boots and your farm clothes, and as muddy as it was, you couldn't keep from getting that on you. And then you jumped in the truck and headed over to your place with cattle and got out in the middle of that and started dealing around, then you're literally transferring any kind of virus, bacteria, any kind of organism that was on that farm to your farm. So the same thing with the bird flu, Gary. When you travel anywhere in town, birds, we know they don't mind their P's and Q's when they take a dump, right? So you got to be careful. If you step in it, make sure you're
we have 20 chickens, so yeah, I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So, but other than that, Gary, I want to say this. I don't want folks in the Democrat Party to become disheartened over the elections as we move forward. There's a pendulum out there that swings, and one of those situations, as we said before, I'm a student of history, and you can go back to the early 1900s and start following what happened in the early 1900s politically, and you can literally kind of pinpoint that at kind of where we're at now. And unfortunately, they say that you need to learn history so you don't repeat the bad part of that. And some of our folks in leadership now really must have been asleep in history class, because they're getting ready to repeat some of the worst mistakes that took place in American history back in the 1920s and 30s. And it's going to put real Americans in peril.
I'm not going to argue with you. It's frustrating, to everyone, not everyone. And the thing about it is, and I talked with Congressman Carson earlier today, and he's like, it's these policies and everything that Trump is doing right now, it's going to hurt the people who supported him first and the most.
Right. Gary, well, and all the reports, and I love, I'm a stats nerd. And so I love stats and statistics, and all the statistics that are coming out now. The red states, those states that voted for Donald Trump, are the ones that are impacted the most by his cuts, and their citizens are going to be impacted the most by what takes place with those cuts. and it's unfortunate, but sometimes you have to step back and say, okay, my hands are tied. It is what it is, and we've got to figure out, okay, folks, this is not good.
And it's going to be really difficult when this happens, not to just stand back and say, I effing told you so.
Well, you're right, and I've got friends who they say they can't wait for that day because they're going to say that.
I'm not saying I won't,
right.
but
well, everybody keep the faith, man. Let's not fall into the same trap.
Now look at you. You've made an Ozzy Osbourne reference and keep the faith. You just did a Bon Jovi reference.
Right. So I would make an Accept reference, but I better not say that on the air. I don't know if you've heard of the rock and roll band Accept, the heavy metal band.
I have.
I have. They've got a song that can really express where we're at right now very well.
I know exactly which one. Well, Terry, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. We look forward to your next article. You're doing one of them a month for us. And we look forward to having that, and we'll get you back on to talk about that article when you get it out.
Sounds great, Gary. And, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I appreciate that opportunity. And if folks have suggestions of something they want me to have input on or write about, have them write into your show, or they can write to me as well. You can put a link up there with my email address, and of course I'll get it. And because I want to make sure that the articles that we write are pertinent and informative more than anything.
Okay. Well, again, we want to thank our sponsor tonight, Robin Winston. He does a great job of making this podcast and the newsletter go. Thank our guest, Terry Goodin. And maybe right down here somewhere, there's a subscribe button on YouTube. Just click it.
There you go.
And subscribe. That way you get notified when the new podcasts come up. And we've done quite a bit of them. Have a few more planned. So for the sick Pepper Snyder, who's under the weather, for Terry Goodin, I'm Gary Snyder, and you're listening to the Snyder Report podcast.
Hey, thanks, Gary. God bless.